Welcome back, everyone, to 1 Million Minds, and welcome back, Balaji, and all of your red self. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Rajni. I have first of all, happy Chinese New Year to everyone and the year of the snake. I have a prediction. The cost of AI is going to come down if you deeply seek the force. Okay? That's my prediction.
Nice. Nice. Way out to go out on a limb on that one. That's awesome, but it's very appropriate for what we're going to talk about today. So let's jump into it. Everybody, unless you've been living under a rock or don't care about AI at all, everybody's been hearing about DeepSeek and all the pros and cons, and it has an impact on the market. Things are getting back to normal. It is mind blowing how much one company like rocked the market for a couple of days, right? So saying that, just like everybody else, we wanted to kind of do some research and find out more, and then give our perspective on that. Just because I think it's one company, but just understanding where the market is headed is good for us all. So that's where we started. So I'll give you my take on it. I've been reading a lot about it. Now you have more of the technical information behind it, but me, from a business perspective, I was starting to understand: can you really do what everybody's writing? How, oh, it's 99% cheaper to. They trained it in 2 months. It was 99% cheaper. Basically, rocks the market for all of the closed source systems. This is open source, and as a consumer, this is great news for me, right? Like if things are cheap, it's amazing. It's 99% cheaper, even better. But usually the headlines don't carry all of the truth, so we want to get another bit lower. So I read both perspectives. I'll give you some. The Anthropic CEO wrote a big word about it, big blog about it, saying how they've completely, when I say they, DeepSeek had $1 billion worth of chips that were using 50,000 chips that they were using that they didn't take into account. So it just shows like, oh, we made this model with 6 million, but the other person spent hundreds of million. So it's false, fake news basically. But even then, past that, that it is not okay. It, by the arc of how these are going, if you are like something that's been developed and then someone comes behind and they're like 7 months behind, but then now they do something, it's going to go become cheaper by a magnitude, right? Like is the same thing that's been happening right now. If you go to chat GPT 3.5, is so much cheaper compared to when it came out. So it's like a technology that's going to significantly become cheaper as the time progresses. So you're saying they are 7 months behind. They do not have the same. They're not peers with what all these top frontier models can do. So the expectation is it has to be cheaper, right? So he's trying to paint the picture that close end models better. We are top end shelf. These guys are going to do that. They're not selling the whole price. That's one side. Hugging Face CEO came out and said basically one of the articles. He basically came out and said, "Okay, boomer," but that's the vibe he got out of it. But what he says, open source is the way to go. One country, one company cannot control this. Open source is how Linux went popular and everybody did that. There might be some sectors like defense and all that, closed source makes sense, but open source should be the winner, and that's where the things should go. So I'll pause there. Give me your thoughts on just high level what you think about this.
Absolutely. And I think it's hard to get away from all the conspiracy theories that circulate around how this came about, right? So let's take a shot at. I mean, everybody takes a shot. So one of the theories is that it's a hedge fund company. They bought a whole bunch of NVIDIA chips for their quants, and then they used it to train this. So I'm like, okay, where's the cost of that when you say you trained it on this, right? But again, long story short, I think there is no doubt GPUs are involved in training because it's not like they train without
Mhm.
GPUs. It's only a question of cost. How did they acquire? What time did they spend to train it, right?
Agree.
And that's the first thing, right? And the second part is I always take a look at because when the news hit, it's kind of spinning out of control, different angles, saying what are we even comparing against? That's the first thing I looked at, right? It's not like we are comparing DeepSeek against the first GPT-3 type of model. I think the direct comparison was drawn to the O1. the reasoning model, right? So this is the
Mhm.
DeepSeek R1 reasoning model. So you have to compare it with the reasoning. Everything else doesn't probably partly apply. Um, you also brought this up early. The DeepSeek version 3 is a mixture of experts model that can, how they trained it or what is the time it took, that can compare against training model in the previous non-reasoning models, right? So the cost of training, that is probably what we are comparing against training
Mhm.
from a pre-trained model, because pre-training is very expensive and they are at the mercy of the big companies giving us the pre-trained models, and then we fine-tune. Fine-tuning is cheaper than pre-training, right? So these are all the things I'm looking at when the news broke out. And I think it's very interesting. We still don't know. We may never know what the cost is, right? That's the ugly part. It's time will tell if there's an um, uh, open what do you call training that's going to get set up with this DeepSeek Open R1. I think we'll see how much they spend training, and only then you'll know truly if someone has spent a fraction of the cost.
Agree. And I think if I'm going on this side, I'm choosing this side of my screen. If I pick that one, I'm just messing around. But if it's really open source, they were able to find a way to do it cheaper, right? Let's
It's
just go
still a
with that.
two-horse race,
That
Rajni. It's still a two-horse race.
yeah.
There's only US and China. Where is India? Where are other countries in this whole thing? I don't know.
So this is what's going to happen, right? I don't think is okay. Before I go there, the source side of things. Now, if you can take this, and I think other people have taken DeepSeek V3 and now have their own version trained on it, right? So those are things that are going to happen. But if you step back, we've talked about this, right? We have large language model, and then you can use that to distill to get smaller models that are maybe not 100% effective, but right there, but is small enough sometimes to put on a phone or small device, and it gets you 80-90% there. Do you really need the complete intelligence to do every single task you want? Any we're going to train on your particular path, right? So if you go down that path, uh, it is only natural to think other countries and other companies, if you have this large intelligence system, can you train a small system based on the outputs from that system and get a model, right? That's the
That,
other accusation is, oh my God, you trained this information on open AI language models. I'm like, open AI, what did you do to do your training, right? So if they, like they have been accused of using YouTube videos to train their model. So I don't see a way to stop this. There's not a lot of incentives for people who are spending lots of money to make it open, other than maybe um, Facebook. At some point, they'll have to stop that too. But how are you going to stop a copy and distill model? Right? We've done that. I think that's how people who don't have resources are going to take advantage of being more resourceful. I guess that's what they have to do. If you're not going to ship chips to other countries, then they're going to use what they have and distill from bigger models that people have spent millions of dollars. And how are you going to apply law across the world on some of these things that are coming up? It's going to be a tough fight, but that's where I think the open version of this will work. And I think copying and distilling is not going to stop. Not with this technology, not with anything else. How do you expect it to, be a moat for most companies spending millions, if not billions of dollars, creating these frontier models, right? So that's where my head is there will be other countries, there will be other copycats, which will come up with their own use case and cost that makes sense for them for what they want to do. So I don't see anybody stopping it.
no, well said. I think from what you said, there are two crucial points that I pick up. One of the thing is that so on the topic of derivative works, and this has been from the beginning, right? Somebody does one, and then they took their art and they created a derivative art. You take somebody's or internet, and then you create some other system that is derived from that. This trend continues now. The reason why I think we need to pay a little bit more focus is that now it's okay for copying, which is mimicking the systems that mimic. It's okay. It's pattern recognizer. Now we are getting into reasoning systems. I question this, like, okay, is the reasoning prevalent in the Western country applied to the Eastern? I don't know. Reasoning is individual, society, community, all kind of things mixed into reasoning. right? So when you take a system and distill that and take it, apply it somewhere else, maybe some of it applies, maybe some of it doesn't. So I think truly another thing you brought up is that making it open source and letting other train is the key, right? Because it's the wow factor disappears the moment you start looking at it. Yeah, that's great, but the reasoning is not the same depending on where you are on certain issues and certain other things. So I think it's a great thing that now we have another rig that you can set up to see where it can go. It's not closed system, but I also want to tell our audience it's when we talk about open source, there's open data. That's the open weights, and then the open data, and then open code, right? It's still not open data and open code. It's still open weights. Okay, so you can freely use it for your purpose, but you still don't know where the data came from or how it was extracted. All that is still not there.
All have
Code.
some doubts, but nobody can prove.
Nobody can prove anything. It's just yeah. So that's where I leave that topic. I think it's a great and I love it when you're constrained. That's when innovation happens, right? You have to constrain the system, then innovation happens. How can I squeeze more into this memory, this chipset? How can I get more done for less? I like that aspect.
Agree. And I think that's where I feel like this is just one of many, right? So we've talked about this. Intelligence is going to become a commodity, right? So can you really, like early on, that is the moat that these companies are going for. But if it becomes a commodity, then the application of intelligence is where you're going to have your unique proposition. So I think that's what I'm really excited to see is as intelligence becomes more accessible to the masses, how many entrepreneurs are going to come up with some creative ways? Because right now we're still doing, we've talked about multiple times, is we doing a lot of patchwork projects. What I mean by that, hey, this is my entire process. I'm just going to automate a little piece of it. I'm going to use AI and I'm going to claim I'm using AI. But if you are thinking about the digital native generation, now they have access across the world. It doesn't have in the US. They have now access to cheap intelligence, and they're not constrained by the process and everything we've done for 20 years where our mind at this point, even though we want to believe we can see past it, we don't. So someone coming fresh new into this, maybe they redesign the entire way they work, and 20 years from now the way we work in the office, the process all doesn't make any sense at all. So that's what's exciting to me is that the entrepreneurs are going to find a way when the intersection of intelligence becomes is accessibility to intelligence and some of the problems that they're facing across the world when they intersect. I'm excited about what things will come up either for us to create or invest in, right? So it's going to be interesting. So let's talk about what
100%,
you have.
Rajni. Yeah, I'm just I use this website artificialanalysis.ai to check pricing. So again, you can see the O1, the input and the output prices are $15 per million token, $60 per million token, right? And you can see DeepSeek is somewhere in the middle here, 89 cents to a dollar. So again, the comparison is for reasoning model, and there's a whole bunch. It doesn't separate it by reasoning and non-reasoning. So just for folks to get an idea, when you say cheap, what is cheap? I mean, everything to the left is cheaper compared to O1, right? That's literally what everybody's talking about. It's cheap, and that's probably why Microsoft and others are trying to host it and let people play with it too for reasoning tasks, right?
So I'm glad you brought this up. Even for me, I thought DeepSeek will be on the left end of the spectrum, cheaper than even Llama. But what I'm seeing here is it's cheaper than O1, but
I think it's primarily because the reasoning is a new category. I don't think they break it up, right? Everything else before that is a different category. They're all fine-tuned models from the pre-training stage, right? And they are pattern recognizers. They recognize pattern and generate text based on the pattern. So I think maybe they'll change this eventually.
Yeah.